Hey guys, it's Kate, and I hope you're having a wonderful day today. I am here with my next watercolor tutorial, and I'm pretty excited about this one because this is kind of new to me too, and I'm very excited to do some experimenting here. So I am going to do some watercolor monoprints. So if you have a jelly plate or something like that and you do printing with your acrylic paints, you can actually do that with watercolor too, but the process is going to be a little bit different because watercolor is water soluble. It'll keep reactivating and it doesn't really turn into like a glue like acrylic paint does. So what you'll need if you want to do this along with me or try it for yourself is some kind of watercolor paper. Today I'm using New York Central 100% cotton. This is 5x7 cold press sheets. You'll also need some kind of non-porous surface. If you do have a jelly plate, you might want to cover it with saran wrap. I haven't tested watercolors on jelly plates, but because it won't all pull up like it would with acrylic paint, you might want to cover it up to protect the surface. But you can try it bare too if you like. I'm using just a clear acrylic clipboard, but because I want to see what I'm painting, I slid a plain sheet of copy paper underneath, and if you can see my camera reflection, sorry about that, it's just it's so bright and shiny I can't help it. I've also got my watercolors, so I've got my Cotman Colors palette, I've got my DDD Praise palette that I got on Temu, and I have a handful of various watercolors in the tube. So let's get started. First, you're going to want to make sure your paper is very moist. So I'm going to start that first. I'm going to spray it on both sides very well, and then I'm going to set it to the side. And it may need to be sprayed again depending on how long I take painting, but first step, moist paper. Give it time to absorb the water. So I've got my spray bottle here, and I'm just going to go over this quickly. All right, so I've kind of got this sprayed well and sort of stuck to my board. Now this part is optional, so I have a woody pencil here. I'm just going to make myself a rough outline because this is water soluble too, but I want to just make sure that I'm getting my painting in the frame. So I'm just giving myself a couple little marks for reference here. And that's it. So now I'm going to pull this up and set it aside, and we will get started on the next part. Okay, next what I'm going to do is any of my leftover water, and you wouldn't have to spray your paper on your painting surface. I just did because it's in the frame. So next what you want to do is make sure your watercolors are activated. I sprayed mine, and I'm actually going to give them another spray. Now, depending on the type of surface you're painting on, you may have a little bit of you know how your water kind of beads up. So I'm going to start with my palette paints, but I may move on to something else. But I know I'm going to need a fairly thick layer of paint so that I can get a nice layer. So you see how that kind of beads up. Now you will be going in with damp paper, so that will spread. So it's not going to just stay in those beads when you put your paint on the paper, but it's just something to keep in mind. And so I am just going to try to get a nice sort of thick layer of paint. I'm really going into my pan here, and I'm just going to make kind of a little basic sort of landscape. So I'm going to go into my blue here and put some into the sky, just like that. And maybe even this yellow, we'll make ourselves a little sun, because why not? We should make ourselves a little sun. Okay, then I'm going to go just a little bit into this purple and back into this blue. I'm going to go into this yellow ochre and add some of this into our green area. And how about some of this burnt umber? And I'm going to make just some little stick shapes. And then I'm going to get into my alizarin crimson and do some very basic flowers. Just like that. This is just for fun because I want to do an experiment too with you. So we'll see how this turns out. It'll be kind of a little fun painting. Let me dip back into that green, and I'm going to try to go over this again a little bit. And now maybe into some of this viridian. And kind of have some little leaf shapes by our flowers here. Now just to see how tube paint might work, actually, I'm going to go into my Purple Lake and my Cotman colors, and I'm going to squirt just a little bit out into my tray. And I'm going to do a couple of my flowers with this creamier mix. So I've got it right here. I'm going to load my brush a bit, and this will give us a little bit of a thicker application, and we can see how this goes down too. And I'm going to kind of come in some of my flowers here and make a little bit of a stronger shape. So we should get some of that Purple Lake mixing in with that alizarin crimson that we've got. And this, I'm able to paint much better into the acrylic tray. So this could have a pretty fun effect as well. I'm just kind of going around. They're almost like little pinwheel flowers. Okay. I wonder how my smaller brush will do with this green paint. All right, I think we might be ready. Okay, I'm just going to give my paper to the side another quick spray, and I'm going to sort of blot it just slightly. So I want it to have a sheen but not be soaking wet with water. And I think this feels pretty good. Okay, I'm going to put this right down over my watercolor, and I'm going to kind of press it in, make sure it has good contact, and I'm going to let that watercolor kind of soak in there for a few seconds. I'm going to keep blotting the back of my paper too. I'm excited to see how this turns out. Okay, let's see what we've got. That is very cool and abstract. So we've got plenty of paint left over on our plate. So, or plate, our tray. So let's see what we get with another pressing. Okay, this one I sprayed the front and blotted it a bit. Let's see how this one goes down. I'm just kind of testing the water. And so I'm just picking up whatever paint is left on this little clipboard. And that gets a pretty nice texture too. Now my shape is pretty much gone, but this is a really cool little background. And it's very brightly colored. I'm going to go back in with my brush while this is all still here. And I'm just going to try some interesting little marks. I'm just going to use that purple lake that I've got left over in my mixing well, and I'm just going to do some little spirals, just like this. And maybe we can get kind of a cool little abstract. But this is something that is going to be a lot of fun to experiment with. I mean, I did, you know, for being a monoprint, it was a pretty detailed little scene, but it's really cool. Okay, I'm going to spray this off camera. Okay, this time I sprayed both sides and I blotted it fairly well. So I'm going to set this on here and press that in. I keep picking up paint with my fingers, so it gets on the back of that. All right, let's see what we got. That's pretty neat. I like that a lot. And it's just so cool, the effect. I don't know what would happen with other, you know, tries, and I bet if you used like the Neocolors 2 crayons or any kind of water soluble sort of waxy medium. Let these dry. We'll just see what happens. Okay, I lied. While that's drying, I kind of want to see what this does on just plain paper. So I pulled that sheet of copy paper out from under my clipboard, and this is just the thin, you know, printer paper that you get. And I want to see what that actually does. I'm just going to give this a couple little sprays instead of spraying this paper because it's so thin. And I'm going to see what this looks like when we just drop it into the rest of what we have on this sheet. Because we might get some interesting marks on this too, which maybe we could use in another project, like some kind of collage paper or something like that. And look at that. That's pretty neat too. And let me put even more water on it and pick up the rest. Let's see. Now on copy paper, this is going to get kind of wrinkly, and I can feel the water kind of coming through a little bit, but the back is still pretty dry. I'm just trying to go easy on the water. But look at that neat little texture as well. We could cut this out and use it in art journals or maybe collage or something like that. So I am going to set everything aside to dry, and I will be back next time. I can't believe I did this, but I thought I was recording, and I grabbed my Neocolors 2 crayons that I haven't used in a really long time, and just colored some random scribbles on this. And then I put another piece of moist watercolor paper into it. Now, I did my first lift and it wasn't really transferred very well. You could still see the scribble marks on here, although it did activate. But what I did was kind of take my paper and just kind of rub it just a little bit in a couple of directions just to activate fully that crayon, and this is what we got. So we got some really beautiful color. I'm just going to go right in with the crayon and make some marks and colors and just see how this goes on the paper. So I'm just going to go into some sort of random spots, and I'm just scribbling. I'm going to make kind of a abstract-y background here. So I'm just going to go in with a few different colors and we'll see how it looks when we pull the paper. Maybe some brown. And why don't we add some kind of pink in here? Okay. Now, what I might try to do also is, instead of wetting my paper, I'll work on a dry piece of paper, but I might spray this. And let's see how it pulls up. So I'm going to press this in, let all that moisture absorb into the paper, and kind of scrub it in here a little bit. I'm just slightly moving my paper on top of this just to make sure that all my color is activated. And that's a pretty neat little effect. I think it would have been more dispersed had I had a wet paper. But let's just see where we can take this. I'm going to keep pressing it. Rub it around a little bit. And just see what kind of texture we can get. Ooh. That's kind of pretty. And you can do some drips and things like that too. I wonder if I just kind of press it down in some other spots, what we might get. I love this. Now, since I wet the surface, I guess my paper is okay, but you wouldn't be able to do this on dry background. It wouldn't lift anything at all. Let me try to mop up the rest of this. Well, I guess I made that a little bit muddy. But it's interesting to experiment with multiple pulls, and there's actually some really cool little lines that are kind of happening here, which I kind of like. It's sort of turned into neutral with some of these bright colors still poking through, but that's a really interesting texture. So I'm going to set this aside to dry too. All right, I'm back and we are completely dry. So let me go through what we did together. So this is that first monoprint that we did with the strong paint on the page, and you can see how strong the colors are, and I love how they kind of spread out as they dried. This would be great for some very abstracted watercolors. And you can also see where I went straight from the tube. That thicker application is these very dark areas here, and you can even see where I just had dots of watercolor, how they spread out, and they're so rich on the page. For this one, this was the second print on that same background without adding any more paint, and you can still see we pulled a lot of color off of there, and it's a lot more textured because it wasn't quite as wet as that one. But this is where I sprayed one side of the paper pretty quickly and blotted it and dipped it. So this was also damp paper, but not quite as wet as this, and also less paint. And this is the third dip off of that, where I added a little bit more tube color here with that I think it was a rose color. And I really love that textured look here on the paper and the darker marks from some of that color straight from the tube. So this, I mean, you can get really textured and interesting, and I really loved experimenting. This is that plain copy paper that we used to just lift up the last bit of color that was on there, and this could be used in collage or anything. And it looks a lot like the watercolor paper, but it's going to not have the same spread as watercolor paper will, although you'd still get some really interesting marks here. These two are prints that I did with the Neocolors 2 water-soluble wax crayons, which if you have those or something like them that is water soluble, could be gel sticks or things like that, I'd say it's definitely worth experimenting with the mono prints. This one I did damp paper and put it in and just did very little bit of rubbing, which kind of helped mix the colors a little bit and get that crayon off of the surface. And then this one I dipped multiple times, and you can see where we had some drips here and the colors kind of blended to go a little bit neutral. And you know, sometimes it's good to embrace a little bit of muddiness, because this is actually some really beautiful color, I think, here. And I just used a combination of kind of a pinky color, blue, green, and yellow. But I love these sort of drippy marks that we got, and just how the color blended, but you can still see some of the full strength color along the sides and somewhere in the middle. So I think this was so much fun to experiment with, and we got some really interesting things. And depending on how you use your water, how you use your paint, you can get a lot of different effects. And for this one, I just thought it would be fun to do a quick little doodle on top of it with my white Posca pen, and I'm just going to kind of turn these flowers into a little bit of pinwheels just to make it fun. And so I think this sort of goes along with the fun little background that we did, and just make it, I don't know, kind of whimsical. This is a really fun experiment, so and I kind of like this too. Cool. And we'll do a little circle for our sun. But hey, that's pretty fun, and you can get a lot of stuff going on. So I'm going to give you another little close-up of that. And this is just, I mean, if you have kids too, this would be a lot of fun for them. So anyway, I will leave you with this, but I hope that you experiment with this technique. It's a lot of fun, and I bet you could get some really, really beautiful results. I think I might bring this into some future videos too, and just experiment with it more, either with watercolor backgrounds or maybe some kind of abstract art. I seem to have been on a flower kick lately. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, make sure to give it a thumbs up so more people can see it. And if you want to subscribe to this channel, you'll see more videos like this. So have a great day, and until we meet again, keep creating.